This is WOC history up to the virtual era at the beginning of 2020. Ready? Go. In August of 2015, the world of countries was established and the first two tribes with odd names were made. Ready to hear what they are? The Moo cows and the Bok chickens. To be fair, everybody was in second grade. But anyways, they all started fighting and it was some brutal combat for second graders. But the Moo cows ended up winning. 1 year later, everybody decides they want a world war, known as WOC War 1, so this girl named Mason really hates this guy named Gage, so they get their child armies to fight, and on the first day, everybody was kind of just chasing each other, but for the rest of the war, people began to beat the living crap out of each other, and even started using giant sticks. It was very brutal for third graders. Gage and his army ended up winning. 1 year later, and the 4-H organization is introduced to all of the 4th graders, and they get to make their own groups with governments and stuff. So this one kid, Maddox, gets an idea. He, the president, named the club Shaun the Sheep, and that club wants to use advanced labor techniques on everybody else. But they came across this group called the Redneck Club, and they try and fight but get absolutely obliterated and surrender. But two dudes named Joshua and Carter try and sell some cheap items for money, but it never works out. 1 year later, a group of people named the Z-Biscuits are created, and they take their arms out of their sleeves and use the sleeves to whack people. However, somebody is being a tyrant over them, so they start a revolution and chase down the tyrant and force him to surrender. However, Gage, the person to take power, becomes the very thing he took over, a tyrant. But the Z-Biscuits move on and try and fight people, terrorizing the place, and this enters them into the Golden War. The Golden War was basically a Cold War with some fighting here and there, but their main enemy was the Breakfast Burritos, who had been keeping secrets and tricking the Z-Biscuits into thinking they had a large army. But in the end, they forced Gage out of power and made a peace agreement with the Burritos, and made a new country combining the two. However, Gage liked to be in power, so he made a new tribe called the Phoenix, and his followers went with him, and they were going into an all-out war, but it was Christmas time and everybody kind of just fell apart. Then, in January, a new country was made, named after Rainbow Six Siege, and it was called Siege, and this was its flag. The country was actually one of the more famous and one of the most powerful and organized ones through history, but would be out-greatnessed by another nation in a year. But for now, they eventually had a problem. A new country was made by some unpopular kids, and it was named Niscovia, so Siege taxed them because they didn't like them. Only one solution was left for Niscovia, so they started a revolution, and a war broke out. It was actually one of the more famous wars and defined the 5th grade history for WOC. The final battle was on the field, and it was disorganized, chaotic fighting until Niscovia was surrounded and surrendered. But then when summer came and school was out, the country of Siege collapsed. The next year was middle school, and there was no playground, just regular old fields, but then they realized there was another nation called the Twisted Misfits, and this was a new discovery since the two new nations, New Siege and Niscovia, hadn't known people were involved in WOC at other elementary schools. But then there was a tension between the Twisted Misfits and the allies of New Siege and Niscovia, so the allies declared war, and out came a second WOC World War, and fighting broke out, and there was even taking and recapturing on key bases. After a few weeks of some conferencing was held, and the Twisted Misfits sued for peace, but the war wasn't over yet because New Siege and Niscovia were at war, and it was absolute chaos and disorganization. Niscovia even broke a treaty of where they couldn't ally with the Misfits, but they did. More fighting, chaos, and confusion ensued, but in the end, New Siege won, and peace was restored, and an alliance between all countries was made, but then they fell apart and a new era was to come, known as the Virtual Era.